What's good? It's Woog. I wanted to talk a little bit about an album that I am very excited about from an artist that I'm very excited about. And that artist is Kali Uchis, who will be dropping her new album. This is her third album, Red Moon and Venus. And she is dropping the album right now, actually. And it's interesting because it's kind of tough to categorize Kali Uchis because she is so multi-genre depending on the song that she's on, depending on the feature that she's providing for another artist. She is very multifaceted. When I first heard her, I thought that she was more of a neo soul and funk artist. This is between the time she had dropped her EP in 2015, Por Vida, and her 2018 breakthrough album, Isolation. The ironic thing about that name for her album, Isolation, is that it was the album after that, her 2020 Spanish album, Sin Miedo, del Amor y Otros Demonios, which translates to of love and other demons. And that 2020 Spanish album she actually wrote while in isolation, while in quarantine, but it's her 2018 album that is actually called Isolation. But yeah, Red Moon and Venus is dropping right now. This is her third album, very multi-genre artist. And like I said, she went from sounding, in my view, kind of neo-soul, funk, and even a lot of shades of kind of indie music, indie pop or bedroom pop. You know, the style that's, was popularized by like the James Blakes and the people who use a lot of equipment and kind of mix the acoustic with the electronic leanings. So she went from that to sounding a little bit reggaeton, bossa nova-ish. I mean, she has done a cover of Desafinado. That's a very popular bossa nova song that was composed by Antonio Carlos Jobim. It was covered by Stan Getz and Charlie Bird. It was also covered by João Gilberto. But yeah, Kali Uchis, she kind of pivots from one style to another. And when I say that she kind of has the reggaeton vibe, I'm saying, the types of kind of dance-like songs that have the general beat of. So she can thrive in that genre, but again, she'll then bring it right back to that kind of dreamy, very dreamy, neo-soul, indie soul sound. And she started first making a lot of noise when she was featured on Tyler, the Creator's Cherry Bomb album, and then a couple years later on Tyler, the Creator's Flower Boy album. She was also featured on a Daniel Caesar song, Get You, from Daniel Caesar's Freudian debut album. So she had a few key features, then drops Isolation in 2018, which it's funny. I was seeing the name a lot and I didn't expect too much. I thought she was gonna be kind of middle of the road in terms of her sound. I didn't think it was gonna be particularly interesting going into the Isolation album, but I was just captivated song after song because of how varied it was sonically that, yeah, at that point I was all in. And I know that songs from that album like Miami featuring Bia were very popular, but my favorite from that album include Flight 22, that might be my favorite song from the album. What's the one with Steve Lacy? Just a Stranger, I like that one as well. Tyrant with Georgia Smith is very good. In My Dreams, Dead to Me. This was a very good and just surprisingly good album. I think it got rated like 87 or something in Metacritic, and Metacritic, they aggregate all of the different publications reviews and their scores. So if somebody gives you a 90, somebody else gives you like a 4 out of 5, somebody else gives you like a 7 out of 10, whatever, however they're measuring it. Metacritic aggregates all of those and then you come out with a Metacritic score. Isolation had a very good Metacritic score. Again, I think it was 87, and it was actually in the top 30 of critically reviewed albums according to Metacritic. So you get your Metacritic score 87. That was one of the higher rated albums when you aggregate the scores, but they also do it where they look at where you land on the best of year list at the end of the year. So if one publication has you as like the 5th best album of the year, and then Rolling Stone or Spin or Pitchfork has you as like the number 3 album of the year, they pretty much tally up how many different publications you are featured in the best of year end list. And Kali Uchis was top 30. I think she was like 29th out of all albums. So Isolation, very good album. Now her next album, the Spanish album from 2020, that one I liked a lot more, although it wasn't critically reviewed as well as 2018's Isolation. I think that the 2020 album actually has dreamier sounds. And yes, a lot of the lyrics from the albums, I'm not a Spanish speaker, at least not fluently, but just from the sonics alone, just from the sound, I actually think that I like that 2020 album, maybe even a little bit more than 2018's Isolation. Again, it's very dreamy. It does have a little bit of reggaeton, but it's more or less just a dream pop-ish sounding album that is sung in Spanish. Very good project, but again, it wasn't as acclaimed as 2018's Isolation. Another thing that's interesting about Kali Uchis is how much of a command of the aesthetic she has. Like if you look at just the look in terms of the style, like in terms of the attire, and you look at her photography, she was actually an aspiring photographer and film director before she became a vocalist. So she is trained. She's a saxophone player, like she's a multi-instrumentalist, but she actually was more interested in film and photography. So that would explain why a lot of her shots and a lot of her music videos, just the whole look, like, you know how, when A$AP Rocky first came out, there was a whole aesthetic with the black and white in the music videos and in the photography. And then who else does it really well? Lana Del Rey. If you look at just the dreamy, like noir, vintage look in her photography, well, Kali Uchis in a different style is just locked down on a certain aesthetic. And yes, she does branch out and go with different looks, but just look at how captivating those shots are. She knows what she's doing. And I feel like that, as much as her music, is to be credited for how well her career has gone in such a short period of time. So now as she's dropping her third album, Red Moon and Venus, I am very excited about this one, especially after hearing the two lead singles from this album. The first was I Wish You Roses, and if you listen to that, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say it is a dreamy sound. So listen to I Wish You Roses and then listen to Moonlight. Those two singles had me totally hyped about this Red Moon and Venus album. So yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on the artist Kali Uchis. Let me know which you prefer between her 2018 Isolation album and then the 2020 Sin Miedo del Amor y Otros Demonios album. Again, I like them both, but I think that second album has kind of taken the lead in my book. When I first heard the second album, I didn't like it as much as Isolation, but it's really grown on me over the past few listens. So yeah, let me know which of those two you prefer. By the way, her second album, it kicked into higher gear popularity-wise, because although the album dropped in 2020, it was 2021 where one of the singles from that album, which is her highest charting single to date, Telepatia, that went viral on TikTok. People started lip syncing the song on TikTok, which again, just grew that song and her album in popularity. So yeah, it's always interesting which different trends or phenomenon can launch a song or an artist's career. But yeah, what happened with Telepatia on TikTok, that just further built and grew the exposure for Kali Uchis. But yeah, let me know which album you prefer, and let me know if you've heard these lead singles, Moonlight, which, I mean, that's one of my favorite Kali Uchis songs to date. That might be my favorite, Moonlight. Let me know which you prefer between Moonlight and I Wish You Roses, and let me know if you have already heard Red Moon and Venus. I'm looking forward to it. I'm about to give it a listen today. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.